Good afternoon. My name is Showanda Mosley, and I will be giving you a brief overview of the Library of Congress subject headings and some of the positive and negative aspects of their existence. Our agenda will be to briefly discuss the creation of subject headings, the Library of Congress's history and their part in the development of subject headings, recurring problems, arguments for and against, process for change, where we are today. Guy Salton, considered the creator of the discipline of information retrieval, stated, "Information retrieval is a field concerned with the structure, analysis, organization, storage, and retrieval of information. Matching information seekers with the information that they seek based on its description within individual retrieval systems, the ability to find or re-find an item at a patron's request is one of the primary tenets of librarianship. But the growth, complexity, and changing design of information retrieval systems can make information retrieval difficult if not impossible. And with the goal of retrieval being as many relevant items as possible while retrieving as few non-relevant items, how do we get reliable matches? A lot of work goes in behind the scenes to ensure information is consistent and concise, especially because much of cataloging information is shared amongst libraries. Even with training without rules and standards for formatting, everyone will produce slightly differing results when creating a record for an item. In the creation of a record, one of the factors that come into play are the classification and subject headings. A controlled vocabulary uses a standardized set of terms to describe information input into the database about an item, and a controlled subject database is utilized to consistently ensure only those terms are utilized when describing that specific item. But what are subject headings anyway, and why do we need them? Well, how will we find everything ever written, for example, about Library of Congress subject headings? Lois Mai Chan, an American librarian, author, and professor at the University of Kentucky School of Library and Information Science, is well recognized for her publications on cataloging, library classification, and subject indexing. She identifies subject headings as a term that denotes the subject under which all material on the subject is entered into a catalog. And there are instances when catalogers working in academic libraries, for instance, are required to create original bibliographic records for newly published works that deal with cutting-edge research or emerging concepts within a specific discipline. Basically, never before seen information. A bit of history about Library of Congress. ALA maintained the list of subject headings for use in dictionary catalogs, and in 1898, using this list, the Library of Congress began maintaining its own list, and the Library of Congress catalogers in the new catalog division began adding headings to the list as new topics were identified within their own collections. In 1909, the Library of Congress began publishing part of its own in-house list, subject headings used in the dictionary catalogs of the Library of Congress, which was considered completed in 1914. As the Library of Congress list of subject headings expanded, the Catalog Division developed principles of subject heading construction for use by its own staff. The list and principles applied by the Library of Congress became the international standard for controlled vocabularies, and the list was renamed the Library of Congress Subject Headings in 1975. Invariably, there are problems. The creation of controlled vocabularies came about during a time in which white, Christian, Anglo-Saxon male hierarchical points of view were considered the norm, and all other categories were deviant and other. This excluded some categories of people altogether, and over the years left the catalog with headings indicative of racist, sexist, and outdated terminology, and particularly prejudicial language when speaking or writing of non-white peoples. But how bad could they be? This is a copy of some recommended changes from a list compiled by Sanford Berman. To highlight a few, changes were made for the ethnicity of criminal to Asian American, Russian American, Irish American, for example, but there is no white American criminal. Changes for references of Negro to African American. Changes for references of mixed blood, those coming from multiple ethnic lineages, to mixed descent. Considered the father of critiquing the Library of Congress subject headings, Sanford Berman, head cataloger at the Hennepin County Library in Minnesota, worked the hardest in petitioning for changes to the Library of Congress cataloging system over his 38-year career. Berman was an advocate for free speech and access to information, and changes to the derogatory and biased language in subject headings. Even though it is considered the most comprehensive, non-specialized controlled vocabulary in the English language, some will argue against the Library of Congress subject heading database's continued existence, citing expensiveness of operation, time consumption for operating and maintaining, too complex for patrons to use, and its lack of currency and continued use of biased language. Arguments for keeping with change. Others argue that its usage is already widespread and entrenched as to render its substitution generally impracticable, but the revision of the Library of Congress subject headings as a standard is generally recommended. And although others argue that subject headings are not really needed, that searches can be done with keywords only, more similarly to searching with Google, Gross and Taylor found in their 2005 study that more than a third of records retrieved by keyword searches would be lost without subject headings. A review of the literature since then showed that numerous studies in various disciplines have found that a quarter to a third of records returned in a keyword search would still be lost without controlled vocabulary. And it can be changed and updated. The Library of Congress Subject Authority Cooperative Program, which belongs to the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, accepts requests for changes, updates, and additions to the database. The proposed headings must have three main requirements. The topic must be a new concept and different enough for researchers to want to search for it. Published works must deal with the subject, i.e., have literary warrant, which has two main aspects. Subject headings are created for use in cataloging and reflect the topics covered in a given collection, and the terminology selected to formulate individual subject headings reflects the terminology used in current time. Authoritative information must exist to support the establishment of the subject heading. Some items can and have been changed within months of the submission. Others, like the petition for the removal of illegal alien from the subject heading database, took almost 7 years, from petition in the fall of 2014 to its approval in March 2016 and its final change in November of 2021. This is because cataloging is not an objective and neutral process, but a political project that requires one to sort materials into categories and then give those categories names. We bring in our own personal biases. But do we really want to change? Emily Drabinski, known for her work in women and gender studies librarianship and recent winner of the ALA presidency, has been writing of a new way of addressing the inequities of the Library of Congress subject headings. She challenges the idea that the classification and subject language will never be fixed, since just as the Library of Congress classification and cataloging decisions can be critiqued, those who consider themselves fighting for social justice reflected within these headings could also find themselves disparaged in later years. For example, in 1972, Negro or Negro woman nursemaid, when referencing a black nursemaid for a child care worker, was considered an improvement over mammies. In today's language, Negro would now be and has actually been targeted by activist catalogers for removal. Locating materials about transsexuality at RC 560.G45 classifies these items under sexual and psychosexual conditions. Locating them to other areas, such as HQ77, emphasizes the social aspects of this identity, excluding the fact that this is not a sexual distinction, but part of a gender identity. These and other types of classifications show that it is not a seamless or objective process as we want to believe, and smoothing over or fixing these ruptures by changing the classification or headings erases the evidence of the dominant ideology at the time and the resistance to that ideology that are essential components to the classification and cataloging project. Drabinski encourages us to instead look at these systems with a queer eye. Instead of trying to fix a functional problem where we think we finally have corrected the language and labels, querying the catalog moves away from trying to fix the classifications and encourages critical thinking and critical reading of the catalog itself. Change user interaction from one of correcting the user's engagement with a fundamentally and inescapably biased retrieval system to one of teaching the user to engage the catalog as a complex but biased text, just as the critical catalogers do. I think we know we can't change history just by altering how the story is told or written, although some may try. Erasing the references doesn't just erase terminology, it erases the history of the word, the mindset of the people at the time, and in 10 to 15 years, it may need to be re-referenced again. Then what happens to the history of those terms? As far as I can see, they just disappear. Some are deleted with no cross-references, and before long, there could be very few people alive who even know that black female wet nurses were called mammies, and that in the 1970s, homosexuality was considered a mental illness. I don't know if theory can be put into practice, but erasing history doesn't seem to be the answer either. Thank you.